I want to start this panel by asking you a question. Who would love to have a government with no corruption?
Rethinking public services in light of blockchain technology. Blockchain's open source and distributed nature is blurring the lines between private and public sector services. How can we improve public services and organization given this reality? Moderated by Liliana Carrillo, University of Girona. Pablo Coirolo, A Eternity. Kenneth Garofalo, University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Lewis William Quay, Nikoshi.Digital. Michelle Chifunga, the British Blockchain Association. Andrea Carbelli.
Hi, here we are again. We have here Pablo, Ken, Lewis, Michelle, Andrea, and Liliana. And I want to start this panel by asking you a question. Who would love to have a government with no corruption? Can you raise your hand? Yeah, I think we have a... Okay, so we also desire that. We are also working for that. So let's hear everyone a little bit, the experiences and what you are actually doing to contribute to this field. Let's say corruption, let's say better organizations or so on. So please.
Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. At A Eternity, we're working in various verticals. Last week we were in the traceability of cannabis, where we're also doing that. But one of the verticals that has to do with this is liquid democracy. We recently launched with the Digital Party of Uruguay, a digital democracy initiative. They're a new party, and their idea is that you do not vote every 4 years, but the representative votes according to what the population says. And we deployed on the blockchain voting, and we separated identity from the voting, because that's very important. You have to get really in the details when you're thinking of voting and government issues. So we were able to separate identity to the vote, and the population can decide what to do. An example of this that I think would be very interesting is Brexit, because everybody voted for Brexit. All the politicians says we want to follow what the people say, but after everything that they have passed through, I don't know if today it's their same opinion. And there's no way to really request that from the people. If we had a liquid democracy, we would know exactly what the majority of people would say about Brexit today.
Yes,
so that's a little bit of what we're doing at A Eternity.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So my work is with Tezos Commons Boston chapter, and I do a lot of community building, host a lot of meetups, and we actually just recently had a really relevant meetup here, and had a speaker from Staker DAO. I want to talk a little bit about what the DAO can do in regards to curbing corruption in public services. So I know a lot of people that pay taxes, and they complain, I'm paying taxes, I don't know how it's being spent, it's definitely inefficient, who knows, it could be corrupt. So why not have a financially weighted smart contract on Tezos, have the tax money be filtered into this DAO, and then distribute tokens to the people that are actually paying that tax money, give them voting rights. Yeah, maybe they can elect a council that makes proposals, but then give them the ultimate power of passing those proposals so they can see how their money is being spent in a non-corrupt manner. And of course, the blockchain allows everything transparently verified. So hopefully more people can take that idea and run with it using Tezos financially weighted smart contracts.
Hi,
Thank you,
hi everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. Just quickly, it announced me as being from Nikoshi.Digital, but that's not the case. I'm representing Tezos Malta, so I just wanted to clear that up. So, I mean, the way I kind of see this subject matter is that this innovation it really addresses the prisoner's dilemma as much as it addresses the Byzantine general's problem. So we all kind of understand that this blockchain technology is allowing us to convey messages so that we can strategically align action, and that's, you know, a fundamental breakthrough. But the prisoner's dilemma thing, I think that is also like really, really relevant to what we need for a stable economy, a free-flowing economy, one free of corruption. So the way I see this is that smart contracts basically allow us to align economic incentive to the degree that we don't have to worry about the arrangements that we put in place amongst people. And I think what that means is that we can grow fundamentally different types of organizations. And I think the conversations that come out of the DAO space really point to possibility. My experience is that I actually try to bring innovation to the public sector by working with public schools to encourage creativity and encourage through music tuition. And we scaled up an ecosystem of like 150 teachers, and we had 5,000 customers. And that's when we really realized that Dunbar's number was a real thing. Like, once you get past 150 relationships, you can't really manage all those relationships. And unfortunately for us, like, we were trying to build this type of new system, but because there are these limits, at some point it kind of implodes. And that was a great shame, because we delivered a great service. So I think this technology really helps us kind of do this kind of thing, do things in a transparent and kind of strategically, economically aligned way. Yeah.
Thank you. Michelle.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I represented, various groups, British Blockchain Association, but also I work very, very closely with quite a lot of government groups to really sort of educate around the potential of blockchain, but equally so also working with communities, I think, around education. I think one of the limiting factors with, with adoption around blockchain is actually the lack of understanding of what the technology itself can actually do, and hence, because of the lack of understanding, there's very little leverage, that's coming out from, players like government and a whole range of others. I think we're starting to see opportunities with things like, looking at central bank, digital currencies and a whole range of other things. But one of our core areas really in terms of tackling corruption is actually using the technology to open up the transparency, be it when you're looking at things like, taxation, when you're looking at things like, public services and goods and services. I mean, we've been, for example, I gave the example yesterday around what we've been doing in Bermuda, for example, how the government is very much taking action and actually, using the technology to support, its delivery. So one of the core things that we really are focusing on is very much around education. But I also think in terms of, let's not focus too much on the actual tech itself, but actually trying to understand how we can leverage the tools. For me, I see it as a vehicle, to deliver trust, to deliver transparency, and to deliver opportunity, and also to help with that redistribution of wealth and value across, economic systems.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. In IBM, we are working in providing infrastructure for blockchain to enable governments and businesses to use blockchain to make more transparent what they are doing. We provide secure infrastructure, both in cloud as well as for the data center. We work with the Linux Foundation and the Hyperledger Consortium to use an open source blockchain that can be the basis for the services. And we developed some services on top of these, or we are working with other partners that are developing services on top of these. And we had recently a large interest on blockchain from government as well as from businesses. We had about 400 engagements in the last 2-3 years in this space, and 200 of networks are today in production, working in our cloud or in the data center of clients. You may have heard of some larger consortia like TradeLens for shipping companies and port authorities, how they can collaborate together to share data in a more transparent and fast way. There is Food Trust, which is a consortium for the provenance of food, where you can trace the entire supply chain of food and understand exactly if you have a problem with something, where this is coming from in terms of, what was the farmer, the shipper, and go on in all the chain. We Trade is another consortium we are working on for managing the global commerce. And we had also some governments in some countries. Dubai has launched, together with us, with IBM, a smart government program where they are looking to different areas they want to enhance through blockchain, digital identity, healthcare records, digital registries of property, ownership of assets like real estate, lands, cars, everything where you want to have transparency on the ownership of something and the way it's moved between ownership of different people. Some other countries, we are working with Gibraltar, we are working with other areas in France. So we are seeing a lot of interest in this area from governments that want to be at the forefront of what to provide in terms of usability of services, transparency of services, open data to their citizens. So I think it's a fast evolving space.
Thank you very much. There's so much varied knowledge here. And in any case, I want to give the opportunity to the audience to ask a question. So I wonder if anyone would like to ask something. Yes? Is there a microphone for him, please?
So you talked about reducing corruption. Thank you, sir. Hello, my name's Alex. You're talking about reducing corruption using blockchain, and which sounds great, and having people able to influence democracy. Sounds great. But I think there's a massive fundamental naivety in what you're saying, and we're not addressing the real issue that you spoke about Brexit, right? The problem is that people are influenced and encouraged and led to make decisions that are completely contrary to their long-term best interests. And so it's all very well giving them government and giving them blockchain and giving them votes and all the rest of it, if they still go making completely ridiculous options because they're being influenced by the general media or politicians or Nigel Farage or whichever other dickhead happens to come along, as Boris Johnson or whatever, right? Or, So what I want to know is what I'm totally with you 100% on what you're on, but you're glistening over the top, because if there's any real solution there, it needs to address a more fundamental issue of there's no point just giving monkeys bananas or people votes. There needs to be more. And what are your thoughts in that?
Can I go?
Thanks for your question. Well, I will start as moderator. Pin Marin de Doping. Okay, I will give the possibility to the woman to actually talk about.
Okay. No, I mean, it's a great question. Thank you very much. I think with everything, it has to go with fundamentally and looking at what is actually key and important in some of these economies. So, for example, take leadership across a lot of, African countries, for example. How do we deal with, strong leadership? Because at the end of the day, if you don't have that strong leadership, whether you bring in policies, whether you bring in blockchain, whether you bring in whatever, it is not going to help with the, actual long-term development and sustainable development. So at the end of the day, I think we have to be able to, clearly and freely address what the challenges are in each of the different countries. And certainly we're doing that. I mean, I'm working, for example, with the African Union, where we're actually starting to look at not just policy frameworks and designing policy frameworks, but actually trying to work with the private sector, trying to work with individuals within communities to understand what the issues are for them, and then tailor the policy frameworks or developments that we're doing based on consultation. This hasn't always happened like this. It's not just about votes, you're absolutely right. And then we always tend to forget about the millennials, for example. The millennials are actually really, really important. The young people often don't really get the voice. or even when they have a voice, they don't feel like they're being listened to, and they have no way of input. Talk about Brexit. A lot of young people did not vote for Brexit.
Yeah.
A lot of young people cannot vote because they're under a certain age. We need to start, capturing and learning what they want because they are the future. So, that's a clear example where you're absolutely right. I think we need to look underneath and fundamentally try to address some of the challenges before we even start introducing technology.
But one of the things that you're saying, which is correct, is if you look at what's happening in the world today, we are at a breaking point in terms of democracy. You have protests in Chile, you have protests in Barcelona, you have protests in Hong Kong. And they're different political systems. They have different political leaders. And you're seeing a common thread. And I think what's happening now is people are starting to speak up. And yes, the millennials are starting to speak up. If you look at the protesters, they're the young people that are saying, this is not what we want. Now, what we need to do in terms of blockchain, in terms of where we are, is that's why we're convinced in terms of liquid democracy, and we apply it on our blockchain. We drink our own Kool-Aid. That's why this political party was looking for a solution, and it says, we saw that you did it. That's why we wanted to implement your application. And we said, it's open source. Any political party can use it. So I think what we need to do is put our ear to the ground and let the people speak and give them a way for them to understand. And for us to understand what there really are and what are the real problems. And the politicians are eventually going to have to listen, because this is a global problem. This is not a problem of Africa, of South America, of Europe, of Asia. It's a global problem. And we need to give them the tools for them to express themselves.
I fully agree with
Real
that.
quick,
It's really a global problem. Yeah,
I got to jump in on this one.
Sorry?
So I have to jump in on this one, right? The answer does not lie with politicians, right? Bitcoin wouldn't have happened if we were waiting for politicians, right? It just happened out of innovation. Basically, what we've seen with crypto is permissionless innovation. We have to enable more of that. That's raw entrepreneurial spirit, right? And when we don't support raw entrepreneurial spirit, our economies collapse. They stagnate. The future generation doesn't see potential. It doesn't see opportunity. So if this technology is going to, continue to support life, then we all have to get creative. And for us to be creative, we have to be in the right environment. And I'm telling you this, the political environment that we see, like in the UK with Brexit, that's not a good environment for creativity. So when this technology, when it becomes clear to people what they can do with technology, then they can get creative in implementing that into new systems. And I think that's the solution.
Thank you very much. I can actually add something from research, from pure research, and it's that for example, referendums are actually not a very good way to manage a country. Why? Because it's a decision of a yes or a no, which immediately will bring us to a possible polarization, right? So then it's actually the think about how are we designing the systems in a way that we don't get in that situation, that we don't just get to a yes or a no, and that we start to actually look at the needs of the people. For example, I'm Colombian and we have to close. The peace agreement was a huge referendum, and it was basically asked to Colombians, do you want peace or not? But it was a huge document. What if we would have divided that document into little pieces and actually see clearly what the people were wanting? And we actually wanted peace. We just didn't want some of the narco-traffic people and killers actually into our government. So it's how we actually use the referendums, politics, and so on. And our time is out. So we could talk more, but we don't have more time. So I just would like to close this with a question again for you. For me, it's a fact that democracy is changing and that we are all getting a voice. So the question for you is, what is your role going to be in this change? Thank you.
Thank you.